Chapter 2. Ariana Pov. I grasped as I got up to a sitting position. I placed my hand on my beating hearts as I looked around. The blue wall color, the painting of pink leaves falling, a desk underneath it. It's my room. Was that a nightmare? But it was so real. The pain. I can still feel the pain. I jumped out of bed and quickly ran out of my room into Noah's. I blew an air of relief as I saw my son sleeping soundly in the bed. I walked up to him and kissed the top of his head and lay next to him. Unknowingly, he scooted to me and wrapped his small hands around my waist, hugging me tightly. An hour later, I made way to the kitchen and prepared breakfast. After getting ready, we made our way to the car. I was hesitant for a moment, thinking if I should take the car. Noah hates using buses, but I don't feel like taking the car either. "How about we go by bus?" I asked Noah. "Okay, Mommy," he said as I looked at him in shock. "That's it? You're not going to protest like always?" I asked as he shrugged. "I want the bus," he said as I nodded. We got on the bus and along the midway I got a call from the office. "Hello, Mrs. Juliana," I answered to my boss.
"I'm sorry, but the dresses for the next shoot have come. They need you to try it on so they can confirm the size today itself. Please come in fast,"
she said as I froze at the moment. She said the exact words as in the dream. I hope this ain't some Final Destination shits.
Ariana, are you there?"
she asked as I muttered a yes.
"Can you come?"
she asked as I looked at my son. He was staring at me, and oddly I was remembered of the nightmare. But suddenly he smiled at me and nodded as if he understood. "I will come. But my son will be with me, is that all right?" I asked.
"Of course it's all right. It's being long since I met my handsome boy,"
she said as I laughed and hung up. We made our way to the company, and I was surprised when Noah didn't complain throughout the time, even if it took till late afternoon. All in all, today was quite a normal day, but it was also not, all because of that terrible nightmare.
"What was that?" I said as I stared at my hands. The power I felt, it was strong but somehow familiar. The door opened and Vicus, my right hand, and Viceroy ran inside. "Did you feel that?" he shouted, panting, as I nodded my head. "It was very powerful," I said as he looked at me with worry. "For a moment, I thought it was your power," he said, fear evident in his eyes. "I am the most powerful wizard to be born in this century, and feeling a power closer to me is surely a threat that needs to be solved as soon as possible." "We need to find the owner of this," I said as he nodded. We quickly made our way to the crystal room. The room was said to be enchanted and powerful, helping a wizard to multiply their power to all places, including dimensions. I closed my eyes and started chanting the spell. "I command the power within me to guide me and show the owner of such greater strength," I shouted as the crystals around us glowed brightly. I muttered the divine words, and the wind around me grew stronger. Thick fog appeared in front of me, and a vision began to form in them. I concentrated hard as the vision became more and more clear. "It's a boy," Vicus said, as I stared at the mysterious, dark, blue-eyed boy. The boy, as though he could sense me, stared straight ahead, locking his eyes with mine. He kept staring, and my heart oddly started to beat fast. He raised his hand to me, and my hand unconsciously did the same. A few more inches, I thought, as I eagerly tried to make contact with him.
"Noah!"
A voice, very familiar to me, shouted, making my heart beat even faster. My eyes widened as I saw a woman walk to the boy, whose name is Noah. Silk brown hair, milk chocolate eyes. He knew this woman. She was his woman. "Aria," I said, as I looked at the figure in front of me.
"What are you doing, sweetheart?"
My love asked the boy.
"I was trying to touch that man,"
he said as he pointed at me. She turned her head and looked at my direction before turning to the boy confused.
"There is no one there,"
she said as he pouted and shook his head.
"Of course there is,"
he said as she shook her head.
"Come on, the shoot is over. Let's have our quality time,"
she said as the boy shouted happily.
"Okay, Mommy,"
he said as he ran out with her behind. The vision fades and the crystal dims its light into nothingness. I stood there frozen, not knowing what to do. "Alistair?" Vicus calls as I look at him. He stared at me, wide eyes trying to grasp everything. "I have a child," I said, as my eyes started to fill with tears. "I have a child, Vicus. I left her when she was pregnant, when she needed me the most. What have I done?" I said, as I fell on my knees. "It's not your fault, Alistair. The council forced you, Vickers said as I shook my head. If only I'd worked harder to convince the council, maybe they would have allowed me to bring her here, I said as he sighed. It's not too late, you know. Besides, now that your son has released his powers, he is in danger, he said as I looked at him. That's right. I need to bring them here. Vickers, go to the human world and keep an eye on them, while I try to convince the council, I said as he nodded. I'm coming to get you back, my queen and prince. Unknown POV.
Come on, the shoot is over. Let's have our quality time,
She said as the boy shouted happily.
Okay, Mommy.
He said as he ran out with her behind. I smirked as I kept watching the perfect target to ruin the White Wizard King. I got to admit, King Alistair, you have quite a taste, I said smiling, as a perfect plan forms in my head. Chapter 3. I watched her walk out of the ice cream parlor with a child, both happily having their ice cream. I smirked as I scanned the girl. She sure looks good. This will surely be fun. I started walking straight at her. She was too preoccupied, looking at her child. Tisk. A pretty woman like her shouldn't wander around in the deserted street at night. Once she reached in front of me, and I grabbed her hand as she screams. She swings her hand and smacks me in the face. The ice cream spilled all over me. She grabbed her child and started to run as I wiped the ice cream off my face. I smirk as I raised my hand. Silver ropes formed from my fingertips, attacking the running beauty. The rope wraps around her waist and hand, dragging her to me.
Mommy!
Her son screamed, running after her. Once she reaches my arms, the ropes vanished as I grabbed her hands. She froze as my face reaches close to her, my breath hitting her red cheeks.
Let me go!
She shouted as she raised her free hand. She swings it to me, but I quickly grab hold to it and twisted it as she screamed in pain.
Let Mommy go!
The boy said as he tried attacking me, but I kicked him and he fell on the street.
Noah!
His mother screamed, trying to reach out to her son. She started to hit me anywhere and everywhere she could reach. I had enough of this, I said as I looked at her in the eyes. I watched her eyes widen in fear as my eye color changed from normal, almost black, to glowing silver. Sleep, I said as she fell limp on the ground. Ugh! I shouted as I felt a wave of pain on my leg. The boy was standing a few feet away from me, his eyes glowing blue and angry. His hands held a ball of power shining blue, just like his father's. Well, well, you really think you can beat me with your weak powers? I asked as he growled.
Let Mommy go!
He said as he sent the power beam to me. I quickly put on a shield, but the power was stronger than I expected. Ugh! I said as my shield broke. I panted as I saw the child send another ray of power. This bastard of a child is stronger than I thought, I murmured as I called forth my power. I felt myself getting stronger, and I opened my eyes and smirked as I see the fear in his eyes. The air is too tense, and the child could feel the pressure of my power. I raised my hand at him, and a beam of light formed out of me. It surrounded him like a barrier, and he screamed as it turned into fire. Tranporus! I shouted as the fire burnt more fiercely, taking him to my castle prison. I smirked as I took the unconscious girl from the ground and put her over my shoulder. Release the queen and the prince, a shout came from behind me as I rolled my eyes. I turned and faced the pathetic king's pathetic right-hand dog. Well, isn't it a pleasure to meet you here, Vickers? I said as he glared at me, his brown eyes starting to glow. I said release them, he shouted as I laughed. No, I said, before I used my power to transport us back to the palace.
My head, I murmured as I tried sitting up. I winced as I felt restriction on my wrist. My eyes widened as I looked at my hands and legs chained to the walls. Help! Someone, help! I shouted, panicking. Where am I? I remember going to eat ice cream at night. Then a stranger attacked. My son tried to save me. My son! Noah! I shouted, looking around the dark room. Noah? Baby, if you can hear me, make a noise. Any noise, I said, looking around in fear. Silence. Tears started to fill my eyes as I looked around, not knowing what to do. Someone! Anyone? Please! I cried. Suddenly, a sound of keys jingling filled the silence, making me freeze. The door opened and I closed my eyes as light filled the room.
Ah, you're awake.
A voice said, followed by footsteps. A figure crouched to my level and grabbed my chin, raising my head to meet his eyes.
You sure look pretty,
He said, turning my face from left to right. Where is my son? I asked as he stopped and stared at me.
That bastard child is with me.
He said as I glared at him. Don't you dare call him that, you fucker! I shouted angrily. He threw his head backward and laughed before tightening his hold on my chin.
I like fierce women. No wonder he chose you as his queen.
He said as my eyes widened. Look, my husband is a very powerful man. He is abroad for his business, but when he finds out you kidnapped us, he will haunt you. Just let both of us go and we will spare you, I said as he raised his eyebrows at me. Suddenly he burst into a fit of laughter as I looked at him nervously.
Alistair is a businessman working abroad, huh? Is that how you fool all the others who approach you?
He asked as my eyes widened. Alistair. Alistair, as in the one in my necklace? How do you know him? I asked as he smirked.
He is the whole reason you're in this mess, beautiful.
He said as he released my chin and stood up. Wait, please, I shouted as he started to leave. He turned back, his eyebrow raised, waiting for me to continue. Is my son hurt? I asked as he stared at me.
He is safe.
He said before walking out.
For now.
He murmured, closing the door as I stared ahead in fear. Short time skip. I woke up from my painful sleep hearing screams and shouted. Panic filled me as I looked around, not knowing what to do. The shouting and screaming increased badly as I tried to block it out by covering my ears. The door started to jerk in force as I froze in fear. I tried even harder to block the sound, but it was too loud. I started to panic, and I felt it hard to take deep breaths. I started to breathe through my mouth in an attempt to get more air, but I couldn't. The door burst open, followed by a series of shouts. Footstep followed suit before I was engulfed in a huge body. I started to panic more as he immediately moved back.
Arya, breathe.
The man in front of me shouted, but I just couldn't.
Deep breaths, my queen. Come on, you can do it. In and out,
He said, and I unconsciously started following his instruction. Time passed by and I felt able to breathe. I stared into a pair of mesmerizing, shining blue eyes.
Ariana,
He said as he cupped my face. His eyes held love and loneliness, and I felt myself falling into a trance. He moved closer, his breath tickling my cheeks. His lips so close, almost touching, and I felt the sudden urge to have his lips slammed to mine.
my king.
Someone shouted from behind as I snapped out of it. I pulled him away from me and looked at the ground, mentally scolding myself.
We should go.
He said as I raised my head and looked at him. Suddenly, blue light formed from his hands as my eyes widened. He grabbed the chains and it broke into bits as I stared in shock.
Come on.
He said as he pulled me to my feet. I lost balance and almost fell, but he grabs hold on me.
Are you all right?
He asked, his eyes filled with concern. I am. But my son, we have to find my son. My Noah. He is the only one I have. I said as I grabbed his collars.
We will find him, and you are not alone. You have me.
He said as I frowned and stared at him. What? I asked as he smiled at me.
I will explain later, my queen. Now we must save Noah and get out of here.
He said before dragging me out.